Well, as promised from the first video, this is the continuation. And I'll be honest with you, this museum is so huge, I could have probably made a whole series of videos. But in the interest of time and folks' attention span, I'm going to keep this as short as possible and try to cover the highlights. So come on along and join me on this hike through this fantastic museum. All right, going to check out the Korean War section. Again, another one of those conflicts that God bless the veterans of that war. People really don't give them the credit that they deserve, and women. Because, boy, having gone and operated in Korea with the Army and the Navy over the years as a soldier and later on as a SEAL, it is cold in the wintertime. And it's hot in the summertime too, but boy, that place gets cold, especially as you go head up north. And over here we've got the Lockheed F-80 Shooting Star. Actually, I have a photo where I got a chance to fly in the dual configuration pilot co-pilot. I wasn't a co-pilot, but I got a chance to fly in the rear seat of one of these, so it was pretty cool back in the day. Throw a picture up there. Just giving you an idea what kind of attire you wear in the winter of Korea, because it is brutal. Even today. Especially today. Ground support crew, mechanics, keeping everything going. Seeing the ejection seats. One of the average MiG-15 pilot. Pretty sparse. Now it's missing the parachute. Usually you're sitting on the parachute there in the seat pan. But you can see that was not necessarily designed for comfort. And then, of course, the Air Force equivalent pilot here. This is a Super Sabre pilot. Still a little I was gonna say not real big on the creature comforts, but a lot more comfortable than sitting as a MiG pilot. Yeah, and of all the aircraft that I really just dug is the Sabre. And a picture of them in flight here. Pilot and his, lead and his wingman. But I love this airplane. It's just something about it as far as just being the true transition from moving from aircraft that were propeller driven to full-on jet fighters. And then, of course, this fighting the MiGs over the skies of Korea. Amazing aircraft. You can see it with its 50 caliber machine guns up here on the nose. It's got 3 on each side. This is what I was calling was a P-51 Mustang,
Museum visitors,
but it's not. So from the side, I thought this was a P-51 Mustang. It's not. It's the F-82 Gulf twin Mustang. I'm not really sure the background of this guy. I mean, obviously over the years, Air Force and Navy had different configurations of aircraft. Let's see, but it does say during Korean War, Japan-based F-82s were among the first U.S. Air Force aircraft to operate over Korea. Okay, so this was an actual operational aircraft over Korea. This was the last propeller-driven fighter acquired in quantity by the U.S. Air Force. And it's essentially 2 P-51 Mustangs fused together at the wings. Here's the ominous-looking MiG-15. Very capable fighter. Primitive, but very capable. It's a side-looking view of the MiG here, and then its engine. You got to admire the Russians, though, given the fact that how primitive the communist regime was with regards to technologies, the innovation of Russian engineers at the time was just unbelievable. They came up with a lot of innovative ideas, particularly when it came to aircraft or weapons designs. Given the fact that they weren't, again, you're living in a communist country, so you're kind of limited to the materials and resources you had access to. So yeah, pretty impressive. All right, and you've got the F-84 Thunderjet here. I'm not that familiar with this particular aircraft, but again, these were early jets in the U.S. military Air Force's inventory during the inception of the jet era, if you will, the jet fighter era. And right across from them, we've got a B-26 Invader. Now, this is the Douglas Invader. I think I mistakenly called this out as a night, or the other one out as a night fighter. The Douglas Invader actually, again, was a World War II era aircraft. Change the perspective here. Step it out a little bit here. And used for bombing, but it also had machine guns on it too, so it could be used as a night bomber / fighter. There's some 50 cal machine guns over here on the wing, off the wing pod over here, next to the little gravity bomb there on the outside of that wing. And you can see it literally had a bomb bay here in the center section. This is where the bombardier would sit at his bomb site to drop his ordnance over the target. It's another perspective of that Thunderjet in all its trim. Little display here of a forward air controller. Essentially guys on the ground that would radio in locations of enemy positions as well as doing assessments after a bomb drop. Beautiful T-6 Mosquito. Again, another aircraft that's right out of the World War II. We'll make our way into the Cold War gallery. Showing sections here of the famous Berlin airlift, where essentially the Russians post-World War II surrounded Berlin and didn't allow any supplies to come in, but the U.S., specifically the Air Force, brought in tons and tons of food and supplies to feed the citizens of Berlin and keep them alive. Thank God for the United States. All right, you got a forward air controller up there. Actually, no, it's a Civil Air Patrol Piper Cub. All right, up there, the yellow one. Got this dual Mustang, which is the, what do they call this again? I just saw it in its blue trim. The F-82 twin Mustang. Isn't that amazing? They've got it essentially joined together by the center wing here. It's two pilots in this thing, or I should say pilot, co-pilot. Make our way around here. Oh yeah, very cool. It's a Convair B-36. Obviously, a Strategic Air Command bomber. A massive B-36 Peacemaker. I didn't realize that this B-36 also had jet engines here on the end of it here. So it's got propeller for its main propulsion, and then it's got jet engines here on the outboard side. Wow. Again, all well before the B-52. CF-100. F-86D Sabre. Right next to a Cessna 172 Skyhawk. These Cessnas are everywhere. This is a little red, white, and blue job. It's got the Civil Air Patrol paint on it. F-94 Starfire. I believe these are rocket, it's like a rocket pods here in the nose section, looks like. All-weather Interceptors. Yeah, there it is. So, outboard deployment. And over here you've got an Air Force LC-126 propeller driven, and next to it what looks like an atomic weapon. So you got to remember that so much of the Cold War era, which is post Korean War and right up until the 1980s, we were living with the threat of Armageddon, with us and the Soviets doing mutually assured destruction. And of course, that being the case, we're always on a state of high alert, ready for the day the Russians would attack us, and then we'd have to retaliate. So this is a Mark 6 nuclear bomb. If you ever wondered how big a nuclear bomb is. So this is a WB 50 Delta Super Fortress, and they've got it in what looks to be weather reconnaissance trim, meaning that there's no bombardier compartment in here, but they've got a weather. And the reason I'm saying that too, I don't really know that much about these aircraft. It's just that on the back, on the vertical fin back there, it says weather across the back end. So I'm guessing they use it for that purpose. There's another F-86 Sabre up close. Beautiful. See the air brake here deployed in the back. Yeah, it's what you think of when you think of a Korean War era fighter. It's this guy. Awesome. Another example of a nuclear weapon here. We've got a Mark 7 nuclear bomb. And much like the Mark 6 we saw earlier, these are all gravity bombs. So they would just drop them over the target, and it had some sort of proximity fuse that would detonate above ground or when it hit the ground, or some variation of that. The Republic F-84 Thunderstreak, another one of the Thunderjet series. And right next to this, got a Stratofreighter. It's a KC 97 Stratofreighter. And this to me is one of the neatest airplanes in the exhibit, the B-58 Hustler made by Convair. Let me step it back a little bit. What a beauty, man. If there was ever a jet that looked fast just sitting on the ground, this is it. Just amazing. This bad boy was designed to fly into Russian territory and drop a nuke. You can imagine. Definitely a Cold War era aircraft. And because it was flying so fast and so high, you didn't just jump out of it to escape. If the aircraft, you had to abandon the aircraft. They had a special pod, and essentially this clamshell would close down on you and then boot you out of the airplane. Ejection seat. But yeah, this is by far one of the neatest aircraft that I've ever seen. Again, it was just a sign of the times. The Cold War era. Won numerous trophies, awards, if you will, for speed and altitude and just this delta wing configuration, which is essentially the swept wing setup on this thing. But you can just imagine flying in this. just mind-boggling. I mean, this is before. Well, I was gonna say around the same time as maybe the SR-71 U-2, but the just the whole idea of flying in this, and there's 3 persons in it. You got a pilot, co-pilot, and essentially a bombardier there in the rear. Amazing. I do believe that is a fuel tank below here, if I'm not mistaken. That large protrusion down here, this aerodynamic looking protrusion sticking off the center line of the aircraft. I believe that's a fuel cell, fuel pod. But the bomb would sit up underneath the bomb bay of this thing, and they drop that nuclear weapon. Whew. Not this particular one down here, but some variant. This is the center line of the B-58. Wow. Talk about ominous looking. Ooh. We have an RB-47H Stratojet. I'm familiar with this one. Again, it's huge, but it says it is a reconnaissance aircraft, and if you can see that, it's like it's only manned by maybe a pilot and a co-pilot. Wow. So this obviously had a degree of automation in it. And this is the F-102 Delta Dagger. This was an Interceptor. So I used to see these fly a lot with the National Guard. So like I said, we saw all the time, National Guard had these Jersey National Guard flying around on the East Coast as an interceptor for potential Russian aircraft contemplating bombing the United States. So these interceptors would fly fast and high and essentially intercept Russian bombers. And off to my left here, we got the beautiful SR-71 Blackbird. And what can you say about this aircraft that hasn't been said? It is beautiful. Again, another thing that looks fast just sitting on the ground. A continuation of the engine nauticals here on the SR-71. Just look at these guys, just massive. And you got to remember that these wings, this aircraft is all titanium. And the wings had the fuel in here. So all these wings are hollow, if you can imagine. And the fuel cells are inside here. So I work with a guy who would say when aircraft was cool before a flight, they'd fill it up with fuel, obviously, before it took off. And the fuel would just be leaking out. So it was designed with tolerances so that when the aircraft got up to altitude and its speed and hit those temperatures, that the gaps would close, so the fuel cells would all be sealed off, so it wouldn't drip any fuel. But it was designed like that. Here we got a pristine example of an F-104 Starfighter. Neat little aircraft. The F-104 Starfighter looking back aft from the cockpit area. And like most military aircraft, the cockpit's pretty sparse. We got a lot of room in there. Stick, throttle, an ejection seat without a seat pan in there, which would have had to house the parachute. But yeah, definitely a tight fit. Example of the F-101 Voodoo. Again, it's in its National Guard trim in the back there. Another F-102 Delta Dagger. Right next to the Voodoo. And then above it, you've got looks like a T-41 trainer. There's another Sabre, Super Sabre, in its Thunderbird trim, because they actually used this model back in the late 50s, early 60s for the Thunderbirds as their demonstrator jet. And of course, the iconic F-4 Phantom. I almost got a ride in one of these. But boy, I used to see these all the time flying out of Naval Air Station Alameda, the Navy fighter wings, getting ready to deploy overseas on the various aircraft carriers that were stationed there and in the Bay Area in San Francisco. This obviously is an Air Force version of it. All right, looking at the pilot and co-pilot. Radar interceptor officer, pilot. Snug fit, the head-on view of the awesome F4 Phantom. Another Phantom. The let's see, National Guard emblem back here in the back. Alabama National Guard, no less. Yeah, they definitely kept these in service for quite a while. Then, of course, you got the MiG-23, which this Phantom was intended to fight against. You still see these things flying around to this day. It's I understand it's a bit of a handful. It's can be pretty ominous aircraft to fight against, but I understand it's quite a handful to fly. You definitely have to stay on your game in order to fly this airplane. It's very unforgiving, from what I understand, in terms of the flight controls and the way it operates. But you know, in the hand of a well-trained adversarial pilot, it could be quite a threat for American adversaries. All right, walking through a B-29. This would be the Bombay area. How's that for claustrophobia? The crew tunnel up there, crawling over this Bombay area. Yeah, that's not for the claustrophobic. Let's move up forward here. More bombs. All right, now you're into the crew spaces here. You got the radio operator over here on the right. That's where the crew seat over here on the left is. That might be a flight engineer. Let's see. Very cool space. Oh, okay. Here's the flight engineer over here. He's got his engine controls. This looks like a it's a navigator. Well, if you made it to the end, thanks for hanging in. And as I mentioned the first time, I underestimated the length of video I've taken on this. So I'm going to add one more video after this one, which is for the U.S. Air Force's aircraft during Desert Storm, as well as global war on terror. So I'm going to throw that up in a third video after this one. But as always, be sure to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.